Welcome back. Today we are cracking open a phenomenon that hits the truly successful independent professional, the six-figure freelancer.
Mhm.
Specifically, we're analyzing the high-value independent consultant, often represented by fields like quantity surveying or QS.
Right.
They've achieved the ultimate dream of self-reliance, only to realize that the reward for success is often not freedom, but a crushing, unpredictable exhaustion.
It is the ultimate paradox of the high-earning solo operator, isn't it?
It really
You
is.
hit that coveted income level, you've proven your expertise, you are technically your own boss,
Mhm.
and yet you feel more tied down and certainly more drained than you ever did working inside a large corporate structure.
More drained, that's the perfect word for it.
And we're looking at source material that analyzes why this happens, and it proposes that the problem isn't the sheer volume of work itself, but something far more psychologically disruptive.
Exactly. And this isn't a story about failure. Not at all.
No, it's a story of success.
Yeah. It's a story about the unforeseen costs of scaling independence, but without a proper foundation. We see these highly competent, high-value QS consultants who are fantastic at delivery, but they crash hard.
And the common diagnosis is always, I'm just overworked.
I need more stamina or I need a vacation. But the source material suggests that diagnosis is just wrong.
Completely wrong.
So the mission for us today, in this look at six-figure freelancers, is to stop blaming our lack of personal stamina and start building the structural defenses needed for, sustainable independence.
That's a crucial distinction. When most people feel burnt out, they assume they just need to power through or, like you said, take a 2-week vacation.
Right.
That's the common sort of linear belief.
Yeah,
Burnout equals overwork.
right. If I'm busy, I must be burnt out. It feels like simple math.
But the research we reviewed presents a much more sophisticated argument. They state very clearly that burnout does not happen because of workload alone.
Okay, so if it's not just the hours, what is it?
It happens because of uncertainty. For the six-figure freelancer, this is the key pivot point. The independent professionals who crash aren't necessarily working 100 hours a week.
No.
No, they are drowning under the massive, constant cognitive load created by decision-making and pressures that they were never forced to manage when they were employed by, the machine.
So it's the weight of the accumulation of decisions, pressures, and responsibilities.
That's the real definition.
That's the real definition of this high-level independent burnout, not just how many complex cost analyses you produced this month.
Precisely. When you were on the corporate clock, so many of those burdens were just absorbed by the system around you. The firm was a shock absorber.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you go solo and become that six-figure freelancer, you acquire the roles of 5 or 6 different people
Wow.
overnight.
Wow.
And if you don't intentionally replace that corporate structure with your own predictable, systematic foundation, the achievement of independence quickly turns into a very unpredictable, emotionally draining, and unsustainable experience.
That sets the stage perfectly. So our job now is to unpack those specific, insidious sources of uncertainty and then define the concrete, actionable structures that the highly successful six-figure freelancers use to turn that draining, unpredictable sprint into a sustainable and, frankly, enjoyable career. Okay, let's move into section 1, the weight of independence. We really need to drill down into this idea of uncertainty
Yeah.
because it sounds like this abstract anxiety, but the sources break it down into 5 very specific high-impact areas that compound, eventually leading to genuine structural burnout.
It's the constant background hum. It's this noise that just draws mental energy, even when you're supposed to be focused on the high-value client work.
A background hum, I like that.
And the sources identify 5 core anxieties that plague the independent professional, and they all feed into each other. It's a vicious cycle.
Let's start with the one that keeps everyone awake at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Financial pressure.
Absolutely. The first point is uncertainty about revenue. And this isn't just about whether you are profitable for the year.
No, it's much more immediate than that, right?
It's the constant low-level anxiety about month-to-month financial stability. When you transition from a guaranteed corporate salary, that assumption that the money will always be there on the 15th and the 30th,
Just shows up.
it just shows up.
Yeah.
When you go from that to a project-by-project cash flow, that underlying stability completely vanishes.
And that must seep into everything.
Every single decision. This financial anxiety seeps into every choice you make. Should I hire an assistant? Could I really afford to take the final week of the quarter off? That constant, detailed micromanagement of cash flow is incredibly taxing.
And I can see how that ties directly into the second point, which is the relentless need to hunt.
Yes.
Uncertainty about where the next client is coming from. You might be deep in a complex quantity surveying project right now, maybe a multi-million-dollar residential development valuation, but in the back of your mind, you're already calculating.
You're already panicking.
Yeah, you're calculating when that project ends and whether your pipeline is full enough for Q3.
That is perpetual, nonstop business development stress. Inside a large firm, someone else, an entire department, is managing the BD funnel and the lead pipeline.
You just get assigned the work.
You get assigned the work. When you're solo, the BD process never, ever stops. Even while you're delivering complex, high-quality consulting, you are simultaneously marketing, networking, chasing leads, following up, drafting proposals.
Wow, it's a whole second job.
You have a second job.
Oh.
And this is often the biggest contributor to the feeling of never being done with work, even when the client deliverables are complete. The work finishes, but the business work immediately begins, creating a kind of mental debt.
This sounds exhausting, even just listening to it. Which brings us to the third point, which hits the body hard. Uncertainty about how long you can keep up the pace. This isn't just exhaustion, is it? This is the fear of physical or mental collapse. Because, fundamentally, there is no corporate safety net.
That's the core difference between simple exhaustion and this kind of existential pace anxiety. If you get seriously ill in a large corporation, there are colleagues, defined sick leave policies, coverage systems. There's a whole infrastructure.
Someone else picks up the slack.
Someone else picks it up. When you, the QS consultant, are the entire business, falling ill means revenue stops, deadlines are missed, and the entire structure grinds to a halt.
The whole thing just stops.
The whole thing stops. And the source material shows this forces many high-value freelancers to push through when they shouldn't, which just accelerates the road to actual collapse because they fundamentally lack defined limits or a recovery strategy built into their system.
And often that fear, that pressure, prevents them from addressing the fourth uncertainty.
Which is a huge one.
Uncertainty about how to say no. You become so worried about revenue, which was point one, and finding the next client, point two, that when a truly misaligned, low-margin or time-sucking project comes along,
You take it.
you take it. Maybe it's a small commercial dispute that requires massive documentation but pays very little. You take it just to quell the anxiety.
And that inability to set boundaries is fatal to a freelancer's energy reserves. It's just fatal. Saying yes to the wrong thing is not just adding workload.
It's more than that.
It's inviting friction, scope creep, and job dissatisfaction. For a QS consultant, scope creep isn't minor. It's the client suddenly demanding a full life cycle, costing, when you only quoted for the initial tender documentation.
Right, a massive change in scope.
Massive. And when you lack the structural confidence to decline that kind of work, you turn into a reactive professional, constantly putting out fires instead of proactively delivering high value. This is a huge hidden drain on your creative and strategic thinking.
And finally, the fifth point, which is the internal chaos that just eats away at productivity.
Right.
Uncertainty about how to structure your week. When you step away from the corporate clock, you realize just how much mental energy was saved by having a mandated, pre-existing routine.
Exactly. The freedom of independence is, at first, mistaken for having no routine. But that's a trap.
A huge trap.
Because if you have no defined rhythm, no dedicated block time for client work versus admin, or a clear endpoint for your day, you fall into perpetual internal chaos. Every morning starts with a moment of decision paralysis. What should I prioritize?
When should I do the invoicing?
Should I reply to that email immediately, or can it wait? That constant stream of micro-decisions is the cognitive load that makes the solo life feel so heavy.
Wait, I want to challenge this point slightly.
Yep.
If these professionals are high-value QS consultants, they are, by definition, highly organized analytical people. They manage multi-million-dollar projects. So why does their personal structure collapse so easily?
That's a great question. And it's because project management and self-management are entirely different disciplines.
Ah.
And one requires external accountability that the other doesn't. When they were in a firm, their structure was provided by the project manager, the firm's standard operating procedures, and the sheer force of the organization chart.
So their skill was applied outward.
Exactly. Their high organizational skill was applied to the client work, not to the running of the business. When they go solo, they are applying project management skills to client delivery. But the business management side remains totally unstructured, and that's what leads to this personal chaos.
That distinction is key. Okay, so let's look at what that corporate safety net actually provided. What were the structures that shielded those consultants when they were inside a larger firm?
The source material is very clear about the infrastructure that just vanished. When you were inside a big consultancy, you benefited from a ready-made support infrastructure.
Okay, like what?
Well, you had a dedicated team, so collaboration, peer review, and task sharing were instantaneous. For a QS, this means having a senior who quickly reviews your cost plan without you having to stress for 2 days about it.
Right, a second set of eyes.
Second set of eyes, instantly. You had defined processes for everything, from filing expenses to client communication and liability checks. There was always admin support, handling scheduling, formatting reports, and logistics.
All the stuff that takes up time.
All the non-billable time. And most importantly, business development, BD, was handled by others. You were primarily hired to execute the work. You weren't perpetually hunting. And all of this operated under an overarching structure that defined roles, expectations, and reporting lines.
So you were purely a high-value QS consultant focused on high-value delivery and, minimizing construction cost risk.
Yes. You were paid to perform one core function extremely well, utilizing your specific expertise. Everything else, the invoicing, the marketing, the IT, the legal overview, was managed by the machine.
And the immediate transformation upon becoming a six-figure freelancer.
Is that the individual suddenly becomes all of those things overnight.
All of them.
You are the consultant, the accountant, the admin, the BD chief, the marketing department, and the chief technology officer, all without a manual or an organizational chart, which, as we establish, feeds the constant decision fatigue.
And this is why the sources conclude with such a powerful analogy.
It really is. They state, if you don't build boundaries, systems, and rhythm into your business, your consultancy becomes a treadmill you can't step off.
Wow.
The goal is always to keep running, but you're going nowhere in terms of peace of mind.
That is the ultimate takeaway for the listener right now. Burnout is not a moral failing or a lack of personal resilience. It's a structural failure.
That's it.
As the source material puts it, burnout isn't a sign you're weak, it's a sign your business needs structure. This completely reframes the solution from needing more willpower to needing a better blueprint. Okay, let's pivot into section 2. The blueprint for balance. This is where it gets really actionable.
Yes.
The sources provide a clear checklist, the 8 pillars of structure that successful six-figure freelancers rely on to maintain their income without sacrificing their sanity.
And this blueprint is essentially how you rebuild the corporate support structure, but you tailor it to your individual needs and expertise. We need to focus first on strategies that create both financial and mental margin.
Let's start with the first 3 items, which center on creating focus and value. Pillar number 1, define a clear niche. Now, why is niche specialization an anti-burnout strategy, especially for a high-value consultant like a QS?
It's the essential simplification strategy. The source material emphasizes that chasing every possible project, being a generalist QS, offering services across civil, commercial, residential, and forensic analysis, is the fastest way to fatigue.
You're spread too thin.
Way too thin. When you define a clear niche, you achieve immediate simplification in 3 key areas: expertise, marketing, and delivery. Expertise deepens because you solve the same core problem repeatedly, making your work faster, higher quality, and, importantly, less mentally strenuous.
Give us a QS-specific example of a niche that reduces that uncertainty.
Okay, so instead of just being a general QS, you might focus exclusively on cost planning for modular construction projects in the Northeast.
Very specific.
Or perhaps forensic cost analysis for delayed infrastructure bids. If you specialize in modular construction, for example, you immediately streamline your knowledge base, your software requirements, and your regulatory framework. You're not scrambling to learn new material specs every single month.
So instead of having to learn a brand new regulatory framework or cost model for every single client,
Right.
you operate within a predictable knowledge domain, which reduces the cognitive load dramatically.
Exactly. And secondly, your marketing simplifies dramatically. If you are known as the expert in, say, forensic cost analysis, your marketing copy writes itself.
Because you know who you're talking to.
You know exactly where your ideal client network hangs out, the specific legal firms or insurance companies, and your proposals require less custom drafting because your track record is hyper-relevant. This reduces the BD uncertainty we talked about, uncertainty number 2, dramatically. You become the obvious, specialized choice.
Fewer decisions in marketing equals less burnout.
That's the formula.
That reduction in cognitive friction is a major psychological relief. Now, pillar number 2 is linked directly to the financial uncertainty we discussed. Raise prices to create margin. Let's break down what margin truly means here. It's not just profit, is it?
No, not at all. Margin, in this context, is the buffer that buys you time and options. It's the crucial psychological defense.
Time and options. I like that.
It's the financial cushion required to comfortably step back, delegate tasks, say no to difficult clients, and manage the administrative side without constant desperation. If your prices are high enough, reflecting your deep niche expertise, you dramatically reduce the volume of clients you need to maintain that six-figure income.
Wait, I have a challenge here.
Go for it.
Raising prices introduces a new kind of uncertainty. The fear of scaring away prospects.
That's a valid fear, but the sources argue that this fear is mitigated by the niche definition. When you specialize, you are no longer competing on price.
You're competing on something else.
You are competing on unique, fast expertise. For a high-value client, say a development company facing a complex planning dispute, the cost of getting the answer wrong or getting it slowly is far higher than the cost of hiring the slightly more expensive but hyper-specialized QS consultant.
So they're paying for certainty.
They're paying for certainty, and high prices directly cut down on overall workload and administrative overhead.
So instead of juggling 10 low to mid-tier clients who each require massive admin input, 10 sets of invoices, 10 onboarding calls,
You might serve 4 high-value clients.
and have more time and less stress.
Precisely. High prices directly cut down on volume. The higher price justifies investing that revenue into delegation later, which we'll cover with Pillar 6, outsourcing. If you don't have that margin, you are stuck doing everything yourself, perpetually doing the $20 an hour work, which perpetuates the treadmill cycle. Margin buys you sanity.
And that leads perfectly to pillar number 3. Stop taking on misaligned clients. We briefly touched on this when discussing the inability to say no, but let's look at the immense hidden cost, the mental cost of taking on the wrong project.
Oh, misaligned clients are burnout factories. That's what they are.
Burnout factors.
Because they violate your structural systems. They represent reduced job satisfaction, almost guaranteed scope creep, and a disproportionately high communication drain. A client who doesn't respect your niche, constantly questions your pricing model, or requires you to operate outside your established processes will eat into your time, your energy, and ultimately your margin.
Can you give us a concrete example of a misaligned client for one of those niche QS professionals?
Sure. Let's take the QS who specializes in high-end commercial tenant fit-outs. A misaligned client might be a small residential developer,
Okay.
and that developer expects the bespoke, high-end commercial analysis, but insists on paying the residential market rate and demands communication outside of normal hours. The friction is massive.
That sounds like a nightmare.
You spend 40% more effort on them for 50% of the price, and that effort pulls you away from the BD needed to find 2 good commercial clients.
And the sources imply that saying yes to a misaligned client actually exacerbates the underlying uncertainty problem, even though it temporarily solves the immediate revenue worry.
It does, because it reduces the capacity you have to serve your ideal clients well, and it reduces your energy to focus on the BD needed for predictable, high-quality leads. It's a short-term financial fix that guarantees long-term exhaustion.
So what's the solution?
Learning to identify the signals early,
Mm-hmm.
usually during the proposal phase if they argue heavily over the scope or payment terms, and walking away. It's a critical anti-burnout boundary. You trade short-term fear for long-term psychological peace.
Moving on to the logistics side of the blueprint. We've established the strategy for focus and finance. Now we need to focus on protecting personal time and energy.
Right.
How do we create the necessary barriers that the corporate structure used to enforce for us?
This moves us into pillars 4 and 5, which are all about creating rhythm and predictability in the physical week. Pillar 4 is simple, yet utterly critical to enforce when you are a 6-figure freelancer. Set working hours and stick to them.
It sounds remedial, doesn't it? But when you are self-employed, especially working from home, the 9 to 5 barrier just disappears.
It completely evaporates.
And suddenly work can leak into every evening and weekend, which fuels that constant pace uncertainty we talked about.
Exactly. Corporate life provided a physical boundary. The office building itself. When you left the skyscraper at 5:30 p.m., you were physically done.
The commute was a buffer.
It was. The independent consultant lacks that physical separation, meaning the boundary must be created internally and rigidly enforced. Setting and sticking to working hours immediately addresses the uncertainty about how long you can keep up the pace because it defines the absolute limits of availability.
But how do you stick to them? Especially when a high-value client, maybe a project manager on a major site, is used to communicating whenever they need to.
It requires communicating those boundaries clearly to the client during onboarding, from the very beginning.
Setting expectations up front.
It means defining what constitutes an urgent situation, which for a QS might be a sudden cost escalation that stops construction, versus a general query about the quarterly budget forecast. You need a commitment to yourself to perform a hard clock-out ritual.
Like what?
Whether that's shutting down the laptop and putting it away, or moving to a different room, or even switching off business notifications entirely on your phone. The structure must define when the consultant is off duty to allow for true energy recharging recovery, not just passive rest.
And compounding that internal structure is Pillar 5. Build a simple weekly structure. This tackles the uncertainty about how to structure your week, that feeling of internal chaos we talked about earlier.
This is moving from a reactive schedule driven by the email inbox to a proactive schedule driven by your strategic needs.
I love that distinction.
A simple weekly structure involves blocking time for specific types of work. For instance, dedicating Mondays and Tuesdays to deep client work, the high-value consulting tasks, when your energy is highest.
So you protect your best hours.
You protect them. Then you schedule one afternoon, say Thursday afternoon, for all the non-client activities like finance, invoicing, and BD. And you keep 1 or 2 half days completely clear of client meetings. No calls.
That dedicated time blocking rebuilds the rhythm that the corporate calendar used to impose. I imagine the predictability alone must reduce the stress levels dramatically.
It eliminates decision fatigue. That's the main benefit. You no longer wake up debating whether you should deal with expense reports or review a structural drawing. Your calendar tells you what to do.
The decision is already made.
It's made. Furthermore, dedicating specific blocked time for business development, even if it's only 2 hours every Thursday morning, means you are consistently refilling the pipeline. This directly reduces the stressor of uncertainty about where the next client is coming from.
Because if you don't schedule it,
BD will always be sacrificed for urgent client work, creating the unavoidable feast or famine cycle that drains mental energy.
So the goal isn't just to be busy, it's to be busy doing the right kind of work at the right time.
Exactly. And protecting that deep work time, the time when you apply your high-value QS expertise, is paramount. If you don't protect it, it will be fragmented by email, turning what should be high-focus strategic work into low-focus reactive tasks.
Okay, now we need to discuss rebuilding the administrative support that you lose from the corporate setting.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Because even with defined hours, if you are spending those precious high-value hours formatting invoices or wrestling with tech licensing, you are still actively burning valuable consulting time.
This is where we shift focus to systemizing and automating, which are Pillars 6 and 7. Pillar 6 is outsource low-value tasks. This is the direct antidote to having to be admin and support for yourself.
And for a 6-figure QS consultant whose time is worth hundreds of dollars an hour, spending time on tasks worth $20 an hour is just financially illogical.
It is.
And more importantly, it's mentally draining. It reinforces that treadmill feeling.
Absolutely. The goal here is to free up your time for high-value consulting work, which is the only thing that actually generates revenue and utilizes your core expertise.
So what are some examples for a QS consultant? What are the low-value tasks?
Well, they could be very specific. Managing subcontractor bid documentation, doing the initial filtering of vendor responses, scheduling software licensing renewals, managing complex expense reports for travel to site visits.
Chasing invoices.
Oh, chasing overdue invoices. That's a huge one. All of that can be outsourced.
And this requires a shift in mindset, doesn't it? It requires acknowledging that you, the expert, are no longer the most cost-effective person to perform every task in the business.
You have to think like an investor. It's an immediate return on investment for your sanity. Investing in a virtual assistant, a fractional bookkeeper, or specialized automation software is not an expense. It's buying back your time and reducing the accumulated cognitive load.
So it's a strategic investment.
It is. Successful independent consultants recognize that delegating everything non-client-facing, the administration, the marketing scheduling, the tech troubleshooting, is essential for maintaining both margin and sanity. If you don't delegate the admin, you will always be one step away from chaos.
Pillar 7 then focuses on the client interface, which can be a massive source of friction.
Huge.
Use clear onboarding and offboarding processes. What's fascinating here is how formalizing the process reduces decision fatigue for both the consultant and the client.
It's the ultimate expectation management tool, which eliminates so many of the how to say no uncertainties When a client engages you, they're uncertain too.
That's a great point.
They don't know the rhythm, the payment schedule, the communication methods, or the boundaries. If they don't know the rules, they will create their own, often detrimental, rules.
So a standardized onboarding process prevents problems before they even start.
Precisely. This might involve a mandatory onboarding checklist, a dedicated welcome packet, and a contract that outlines scope and revision limits, specifically mentioning what a QS will not cover. For example, liability for design flaws.
You're drawing the lines clearly.
This removes client uncertainty, which in turn reduces the friction and the reactive decision load for the consultant. Fewer questions about what happens next means fewer reactive, unexpected emails in your inbox, which protects that precious deep work time.
And you mentioned offboarding is just as critical. I think most freelancers forget this part entirely.
They do. And offboarding is critical for preventing project bleed.
Project bleed?
Yeah, it provides a clean, emotional, and logistical sense of completion. A formal offboarding process, which might include a final summary document, a satisfaction survey, a specific handover of deliverables,
And a final sign-off.
and a clear communication stating, this engagement is now complete, future requests require a new contract, ensures the project doesn't just bleed into eternity with low-level follow-up questions.
Ah, I see.
It prevents the client from assuming they can still ask for just one more quick thing weeks after the final payment. Clear steps, manage expectations, reduce friction, and ensure you can emotionally and logistically move on to the next high-value project without any residual stress.
We've covered structure, boundaries, delegation, and systematizing client interaction. Let's finish with the ultimate stress reliever. We started by identifying financial instability, the uncertainty of where the next client is coming from, as the #1 stressor for many high-earning freelancers.
Yes, and Pillar 8 is the antidote.
Yeah.
Create predictable lead flow. This is the system that directly eliminates the uncertainty about where the next client is coming from. It turns business development from a source of panic into a repeatable, scheduled component of the business.
Predictable lead flow is the difference between panic-driven, reactive marketing, like scrambling when the pipeline looks empty, and systematic, calm business development.
It's turning BD from a feast or famine hunt into a steady stream. And this is where all the previous steps converge beautifully.
How so?
If you have defined a clear niche, that was Pillar 1, and you've raised your prices, Pillar 2, you know precisely who you serve and what value proposition resonates with them. That makes marketing focused and effective.
You're not just guessing anymore.
No. You stop accepting general invitations and start targeting specific industry events or high-value referral partners.
So instead of shouting into the void, you are having targeted conversations with highly qualified prospects.
The type who understand and respect the high margin.
Exactly.
The creation of predictable lead flow means moving away from simply reacting to referrals and moving toward evergreen activities.
What's an evergreen activity?
For a QS specializing in forensic analysis, this might mean writing one highly specific, detailed white paper a quarter that gets shared with 5 target law firms.
Ah, so it works for you in the background.
It's always working. Or establishing a consistent presence on a platform where construction project managers look for high-level risk mitigation experts. The point is, it must be consistent, not frantic.
And the key is that it must be systematized, much like the BD department in the corporation was systematized.
Exactly.
It needs to happen regardless of how busy you are with current clients. Otherwise, the anxiety immediately returns when the current project wraps up.
Correct. Remember the simple weekly structure from Pillar 5.
Yeah.
That dedicated, blocked time for BD is what ensures predictability. By making lead generation systematic rather than frantic, you replace the panic that accompanies an empty pipeline with the calm assurance that new, high-quality projects are always entering the funnel.
So predictability in this context.
Predictability is the ultimate anti-uncertainty tool. It allows the 6-figure freelancer to focus on the current client without simultaneously worrying about the next one.
So what does this entire analysis mean for you, the listener, whether you are a QS consultant or any other high-value independent professional? What's the big takeaway?
I think it means shifting your perspective.
From what to what?
From self-blame, I must be bad at work-life balance, to structural diagnosis.
I like that. A structural diagnosis.
We've seen that the independent journey, while lucrative, naturally strips away the structures that supported your success in a corporate environment. If your independence feels heavy, the core message from the source material is crystal clear. It's not you, it's the lack of system.
It's not a personal failing.
It's not a personal failing. The blueprint of the 8 pillars provides the actionable framework for replacing that structure.
And the ultimate promise here, which is confirmed by the experiences of successful six-figure freelancers, is that once you build that structure, once you define the boundaries, systematize the chaos, and create financial margin independence, stops feeling heavy.
And it starts feeling exactly how you imagined it would.
You finally get to be the specialized expert without being buried by the admin.
Exactly. And this raises an important question for everyone listening. We discussed 5 sources of deep uncertainty: revenue worry, next client panic, pace anxiety, the inability to say no, or that weekly structure chaos.
Right.
So look at those 8 pillars: niche, price, client selection, working hours, weekly structure, outsourcing, process, or lead flow predictability. Which single pillar, if you implemented it starting today, would immediately address your biggest source of weekly uncertainty and provide the greatest reduction in your cognitive load?
Use the source material not as a suggestion, but as a diagnosis tool. Identify the single weakest point in your structure right now.
And start there.
That is the only place you need to focus your effort this week to move toward the balanced, sustainable success that being a six-figure freelancer is truly supposed to deliver.